Has this ever happened to you? You open your child's progress report in anticipation of seeing the progress that they've made, and you see all these NPs by your child's reading goals. And NP means no progress made. And you're like, what? It's like, what? When he reads for me at home, I have seen such giant improvement with his reading skills. It's like, how can this be? How can he be reading so well at home and not at school? Well, this is a common problem, and we have a solution for you today. So I want you to buckle up because we're going to have some fun, and we're also going to do a lot of learning today. So we're going to start with tip number 1. What can you do when there's gap between what happens at home and at school? Well, videotape your child reading at home and send it to the teacher. Now, you might be saying, because I know you're a smart cookie, Charmaine, I've already done that. I've already videotaped my child reading. I've emailed it to the teachers several times. I don't hear anything back. I don't even know if they watch it. And it's like, well, this is the special part of tip 1. Not only do you videotape your child reading at home and share it with the staff, you also ask the teacher to videotape your child reading at school. And then, this is important, you set up a time that you can both meet and sit down side by side and watch these 2 videos. And then look at the differences that you see. How is the teacher introducing this reading skill? What are you seeing when your child reads for you at home? Make a list of the differences, and we'll be pointing some of those out in a minute. And also, are there some similarities? And then you want to look and say, okay, under what conditions, what circumstances do we need? So it's the optimum rate for your child to be making progress in reading. So we are going to dive into more tips. So I want you to stay tuned, and we'll be talking about bridging that gap between home and So one of the problems that I see is that sometimes we think whatever we see in one situation, like whatever the teacher sees, must be the reality of what your child's reading skills are. Or as a parent, you must be like, I hear him read every night. I know how well he's doing. And those 2 perspectives never come together. And that's one of the tips that we want to share with you today, is bringing the home and the school together and looking at how can we make sure that those skills are not just being used at school or not just being used at home, but how can we make sure that your child is using those new skills in both settings, right? So if you were here with us a couple weeks ago, we talked about how to advocate for meaningful progress reports. Now, if you didn't get your copy of this, I can put the link in the comments and you can get one. So today, what I thought would be helpful if we did a follow-up to meaningful progress reports and look at why we see those differences between what your child does at school and maybe what they're doing at home. So I've made a couple checklists for you. I'm going to show them to you, and we'll go over some of the highlights of it. And then remind me, because I can also give you copies of the checklist. So let me share my screen here, and oops, I think I want to do, let's see. Nope, I don't think that worked. It's like, what? Okay, so here's our checklist, and I can pull this out a little bit. So, one of the things that you want to look at are the directions that are being given to your child. So, is your child hearing instructions one way at school, and then you have a different way that you are explaining the instruction or you're giving the instructions? So, the consistency in wording can be something that you want to make sure you deal with. I don't know why I'm trying to do something and it's not working. So, one of the things that you would want to check first is making sure that when you're watching the videotape of what you do, when you're watching with the teacher the videotape of what's happening in school, notice, are there certain directions and your child responds to that? And if you reword it, your child doesn't respond. Now, there's a couple like caveats here. It's like, yes, we want your child to be able to perform these skills and generalize them in different places. And depending on where your child is learning, the new skills and how solid they've, mastered those skills, I think it's really helpful to start out with using consistent phrasing, consistent directions, both from the teacher and from the parent at school. And what you want to do is, over time, right? You would like your child to be able to do this without those specific directions. And it depends. For some students, if you both only give the same direction all the time, then your child gets stuck in this mode of, no, I don't do that unless you say it like this. So there's this fine line between, being consistent and not allowing your child to be able to generalize it in other ways. So that's one thing that you want to be looking for. And then another thing is just the materials that they're using. At home, you might not have the manipulatives and the number line and the base 10 blocks, and the school might have that. And that's easy problem to solve, because what you can do here's your next tip, is to ask the school for a set of base 10 blocks. It doesn't have to be, a big classroom set, right? Just for your child. Or ask for copies of the number line that they're using at school. This is something that's going to help your child learn, and also it's going to help the teachers at school when your child is more familiar and their child has experience using these materials, not only at school but at home. So let me know, say hi, let me know where you're watching from, and have you ever asked for materials at home? I think during COVID, this was like a more kind of common practice. And I think it's, something that was a positive from COVID. It was like teachers were thinking, well, I don't, it's hard for the parents to do this math lesson unless they have the Unifix cubes like we do at school. It's going to be harder for your child. So it's a quick, easy ask, and you should be able to get them just lickety split. Hey, Katie from Oklahoma. My guess is Bixby, Oklahoma. The parents down there have been rocking and a rolling. So, what could be another difference? So, let's go back here to our checklist. Another difference could be the text and the font size. And font size is like a really big thing. And so when you're at home reading a book or going through some other reading exercises, what, is that text really small? Is it large? What size are they using at school? I often see on accommodations that the child needs enlarged print or enlarged font size, but they never say what size. So for different kids, it's different. So if the school is using enlarged font, you want to find out what size it is because maybe that's the difference, right? Maybe if the font was a little bit larger, your child would have an easier time reading. So check the size of the font and let's look what else. So, what type of device or assistive technology are you using at home and what are they using at school? So, at school, I think it's pretty common for kids to have Chromebooks or some kind of a tablet that they use for a lot of their lessons. And so, if you don't have access to that at your house, that could be also a request that you make to the team that your child be able to check out that Chromebook or tablet that they use at school and to be able to use it at home for homework. Um, so let's say hi. Hey, Tiffany from North Carolina. And we have, oh, all right, more Bixby. We're going to have like a Oklahoma division, right? Yeah, if you haven't been following what's happening in Bixby, Oklahoma, I should share your posts that you guys have about the systemic state complaint that a group of parents have filed in Oklahoma. So we are cheering them on. Now, if you look at your checklist, another variable might be the timing and the task duration. Like, how much time does your child spend on a certain task? Do you give them reminders? Do they have some kind of a visual timer? Or at school, how much time does your child have for the same task? Are there reminders or prompts that the teacher uses? And it's like, ooh, I bet that would work at home. I want to do that. I want to do that too. Now, a big difference between, especially like when you're collecting data and scoring things, a big difference is our self corrections when your child says something and then they correct themselves. When you're listening to them read at home and they make a mistake and they correct themselves, would you consider that correct or incorrect? And how often does that self correction happen? Because at school, maybe the teacher, depending on like the assessment and such that they're given, maybe the tool says, oh, if the child self corrects, it still counts as an error. So little things like that, like how process and see how your child's making progress versus maybe the parameters at school that the teacher has to follow because of the tool that they're using. So another thing that you could check and see as far as differences between what's happening at home and school is the specific praise that's given to your child. Um, what kind of praise do you give? And I'm not really talking here about rewards and external kinds of things like that, but a lot of kids just really respond when you recognize the work that they've done and you give them some specific praise about it. So is there a difference between that and what's happening at school? So I'm going to pause here before we go to our second checklist. So let me know, has this ever happened to you as far as your child's doing like fantastic at school and not at home, or the opposite? Your child's like killing it, kicking it at home and not making progress at school. Have you had that dilemma and things being so different between school and home? And if you have, let me know. Um, one of the things that I think is common that I've heard in other IEP meetings And this example is like, maybe your child is still working on learning some basic sight words. And so at home, you bought these, 5x7 index cards, and you've written the word in very large font, takes up the whole card. And one by one at home, you're showing your child these sight words, and it's like the pile of what they're getting right is a lot higher than that other pile of cards or words that they missed. However, when you sit down with the teacher and look at how they're teaching reading and how she's measuring the progress with sight words, you notice that the teacher has like one sheet and she has 100 sight words on it, and it might even be a 2-column thing. And she just has your child read the words down the list. Now, those are two very different ways of checking how many sight words your child knows. And if you're getting more success at home, I bet it's because of that single word written on that 5x7 card versus your child having to, just like the whole too many words on a piece of paper kind of thing, or losing track, so it's like little things like that can make a huge difference. So, Katie, let's see what you say here. She said, yes, reading great at home. And the school says he's way lower on assessments. And so, and then that's right. That's like a whole thing that's different, because when you're, like look at the setting at home, like say you're, sitting on the couch next to your child and you're taking turns reading, you read a page, your child reads a page, and things are going along smoothly. Like, look at that environment. It's relaxed. I'm with my mom, who's very supportive. I just have to read one page. Then my mom's going to give me a break and she's going to read the next page. Those conditions are very different than sitting down across from a teacher one by one, and she's got her clipboard and she's making check marks, and you're sure that means you're making lots of mistakes and you're starting to like get panicked. So, yeah, just those conditions of just fun reading supported with an adult and being in a test situation, you probably will see different results there. And that's where you need not just like the quantitative data on progress reports, but that's where you want that qualitative data. Like, yes, this is what his score on the assessment. However, when I just read with him in class, he does much better in reading. We need to question the reliability, the validity of the assessment, because I really, as a teacher, I've seen his skills be, much higher than that. So sometimes we need that qualitative narrative to help us understand this is what he did on that day on this test. But when I read with him every day, this isn't really a true assessment of what's going on. So Katie says, that's so interesting. I never thought about that. We taught on flashcards at home. Yeah, so that's where that first tip that we gave at the beginning is so important, that you share a video of how things are going at school. You have the teacher make a video. You both sit down together and look at it. The other thing about videotaping your child at home is, I've had parents send in videotapes to show this is how my child's doing their math or whatever. This child actually can do this math with the calculator, with me writing the numbers down, but the child is doing the whole process on the calculator. Like, when you videotape something like that at home, you want to kind of have a wider range of the picture, because excuse me, because sometimes teachers are like, if you do like a close up of your child working, they're like, oh, I bet the parent was right next to them and kind of like hinting at things. So if you do a broader, what is that called? I don't know, a wide shot of your child working, and you could be sitting next to your child, and that's fine, right? But you want to get the whole picture of, I was sitting right next to him, or I was sitting across from him at the dining room table. So you really see what that looks like. In just the same way, I don't want teachers just to send you a videotape of this is what your child did during the assessment. I mean, that would kind of skew the assessment when you have a videotape going. But like during a reading lesson, or during, a time where they're actually, working with your child, or your child just reading one-on-one. Because, yeah, you'll be amazed at the little bit of differences. So join in the conversation. We're going to go on to the second checklist here. So this is a little bit more about how both you as a parent and the teachers can stay on the same page. So the biggest thing is regular check-ins. And a lot of times, if see where my highlighter is, a lot of times you maybe only hear from the teacher during progress report time, or if they have like a parent teacher time, conference time, but you really want to set up some kind of regular check-ins. Now, the tip here is to find out how the teacher likes to communicate. Because if they would rather have an email, then you want to email. If they would rather have a back and forth notebook, and you guys, you write what's happening at home, they give you ideas of what's happened at school that day, use that. So use a communication tool that the teacher is going to be, used to using, comfortable using. And here is that little extra tip. You want to make sure whatever the teacher and you are communicating is really helpful, right? So you as an individual parent need to share what information you need about your child, because maybe what they're communicating in that email with you or in that notebook is like, no, this is not helping me figure out anything. So those regular check-ins, and it can be, some parents do like a meeting every month for 30 minutes, and you keep it brief, but it's a time everybody can talk. So sharing the video recordings, we've talked about that one. And then here's a way that I think I've seen more schools start using, and this is a shared document. And what is nice about it is then it's like a Google document. You can have the other staff members, like the PT, the OT, have access to the same Google Doc. And so each time, the OT is working with your child, they can come into that Google Doc and give you a description of what they did, how your child did. And then the special ed teacher, the general ed teacher, hopefully are putting in some daily comments in there also. So that shared log can be really helpful. One of the things that can come up is you can make a request and say, please share, I want to see the progress monitoring or the data collected or whatever. And the teacher might respond in like, oh, that's on the student portal on the website. And it's like, as a parent, you're like, I don't know what they mean by student profile. And I've never seen this on the website. So if there's an electronic way that teachers are tracking data and things like that, and you're having this communication, you need to make sure you can access your child's folder on whatever online portal that school and district is using. I think too many assumptions are made that parents know, and it's like, oh, I need a password. How do I get a password? I mean, if you're not familiar with the system that your school uses, you really need to sit down with somebody and have them help walk through that with you. Now, the other thing that can be really helpful, this is on your checklist, is to observe people virtually or in person. Now, if you are sharing those videotapes and talking about them, right? That's one way that's probably going to be the most convenient for folks. However, if you can, take some time from work and be able to go into the building and actually watch and observe your child in class, that's like the best way because you really sense what the environment is like, what the other students are doing when your child is working with the teacher, whatever. So in-person observations can be very helpful. Now, we talked about this a little bit earlier as far as using the same materials. So, sometimes teachers will say, well, he has this visual card of, what he needs to be doing if he start getting upset. And it's like, as a parent, you're like, ooh, I bet something like that would be helpful at home. So ask the teacher, can you please send home a copy of that visual card that he's using at school? Because I want to use that at home. So the more that you guys can be partners and collaborate with the school, the better it's going to be for your child. And I recognize that there are times when you're going to be at, have pretty significant disagreements, and it's going to be more challenging to be collaborative. However, hopefully you can continue to build those relationships and keep the conversation going. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, is to have that open dialogue. And so I was checking for other comments. Yes, you guys, what else are you thinking about this? What other situations have you come across that, makes you wonder and it gives you some ideas of what you could do? So, sharing progress reports, right? We've been talking about progress reports. However, not just having the progress report get emailed home or sent home in your child's backpack, but that might be the perfect opportunity for you to sit down with the staff. And if you get progress reports every month, you'd be sitting down every month and maybe say for a half an hour, and you go through the progress report so you can ask questions, get answers in real time, and not have to do this back and forth through email. So sitting down together is like a very helpful thing to do when you get a new progress report. If you're only getting progress reports 4 times a year, then that would be a time that you would want to schedule a informal meeting. You might want to ask for it to be a formal IEP meeting, have the whole team there to review the IEP. So things like that. And the other tip I have for what you can be doing throughout the year is resharing your About Me profile that you probably shared in August or September with your child's teachers. Because that About Me profile probably talks about what works with your child, what doesn't work, the success that they've had. And just bringing that to the forefront and reminding people, like, these are things that we know about my child. So those kinds of updates and resharing of material and, ideas are really, really helpful. So, yes, we have a vote for the Google Doc. Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that can be shared is, if the staff is taking data and, putting it on a spreadsheet, that could be something else that you have access to. So ask. Those are the tips that I have for you for today. And you know what I could do is I can give you, if you don't have the progress report eGuide, you can go to iep.today progress reports. And the two checklists that I shared with you today, I just got to do a little bit of formatting with them, and then I'll be able to give you the links for those checklists too. So, any other questions on how things are going and how we could try to get more consistency between home and school, and also how we can open up those communication lines between home and school? So let me know. Do you have more comments, or questions? So we will be back in the beginning in November. This is October. So we do these videos twice a month. This is our second time for October. So now we kind of have almost a 3-week break between now and Thursday in November. So I hope you will circle back. Always know that you can come into our Art of Advocacy group here and ask questions, because that's what this page is for me to provide some help for you. And then if you need more ongoing help, we also have a wonderful membership community of fantastic parents. And so if you're interested in our Connecting for Change group, you can also ask me about that. So I don't see any other questions coming in. Thank you for being with us live, or if you're watching the replay, add your comments and questions, and we will see you in about 3 weeks. So take care. And we are